So welcome to this World AIDS Day reading honoring Robert Ferro and Walta Borawski. We're thrilled to have such a full house and so many friendly faces we know and a few new ones. My name is Greg Newton. I, along with my partner, Donnie Jokum, am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, the space you find yourselves in right now. The Bureau is a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. And this is the service that we provide, holding the space for queer books and queer culture. So we're happy to have you here. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we have regular bookstore hours Wednesday through Sunday, 1 to 7 p.m. And then we stay open late whenever we have an event such as this. What else did I want to say? If you are not already on our email list, you can sign up for that at the back of the room, and you'll get an email every other Monday. And because we are an all-volunteer organization, we're always asking for donations. Donations and sales are what keep this boat afloat. So we really appreciate whatever you're able to donate. We have a bag with change in it. I'll pass that around. If you want to pay with a credit card, you can do that at the register, or you can Venmo us at EGSQD. And those letters are all around you again, again, and again. I'll pass that. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce Philip Clark, and then we're going to jump right into this reading. So Philip Clark is the co-editor of Persistent Voices, Poetry by Writers Lost to AIDS, and In the Empire of the Air, the Poems of Donald Britton. The recipient of a MacDowell Fellowship, he is currently completing a biography of 1960s gay publisher H. Lynn Womack. He lives near Washington, D.C. Please welcome Philip Clark.
Thanks, I'm tall. So we really would like to welcome you to the World AIDS Day reading. That is marking the release of Invisible History, the collected poems of Walta Borawski, and the re-release of Robert Ferro's novel, Second Son. We'd like to thank Greg and Donnie and BGSQD for hosting this event. I'd also like to thank Sven Davisson of Rebel Satori Press for agreeing to publish Walta's poetry, and Tom Cardamone, who is here tonight, who's the managing editor of Rebel Satori's new series, the Library of Homosexual Congress, which is inaugurated by Invisible History. So Tom, thank you very much for soliciting my ideas for the series, and I'm thrilled that this book manages to be the first one. I'd also like to thank everyone here for coming out on the cold Thursday night in order to really celebrate and to remember the era in which Walta Borawski and Robert Ferro were both writing. Walta was a poet and Robert Ferro was a novelist, but their work spans the years of the gay liberation era and then the onset of the AIDS crisis and all of the effects that that had on the LGBT community. So thank you for coming out to memorialize those eras of our lives. And I'm really glad that we're able to have this at a physical space like this bookstore, like the Bureau. It's the kind of thing that allows us to come together as a community in ways that the internet, however powerful it is, truly can't foster. So thank you very much for coming out. I'm going to start by introducing my co-editor on Invisible History, who is also Walta Borawski's partner. Michael Bronski is an independent scholar, journalist, and activist who's the author of numerous books, including Pulp Friction, The Golden Age of Gay Male Pulps, and A Queer History of the United States. He's professor of the practice in activism and media in the studies of women, gender, and sexuality at Harvard University. Michael Bronski.
Not as tall as Philip is. I'm going to be very brief. I want to speak a little bit about the book and about Walter. Everybody else who did the reading, they're much better readers than I would be of these poems. It's a little bit weird because I've actually been living with these poems for close to 50, some of the poems 50 years, and some of them are about me too. But I think that one of the most important things to remember is that these poems and his first two books, right, which are included in this collection, would not have happened without a community up in Cambridge, without a community that included publications like Fag Rag and Good Gay Poets. And that it was really, that was the nurturing part of not only Walter, but for many, many, many people writing at the time, whether it was in New York or San Francisco or in Boston. Having said that, I would say that while the community nourished Walter and he nourished it, and Kevin and Catherine will attest this, Walter's often never community minded. We'd have people for dinner and he'd actually leave right after he ate to go into his bedroom to listen to Barbra Streisand records because he didn't like too many people in the kitchen. He never stayed at parties at our own house very long. He went into his room. But when I read the book through twice now, because I obviously read this repeatedly over the years. But what I think is remarkable about the book is that it really documents certain type of gay male life before AIDS and after AIDS. Right, it really is a document beside Walter's own history, and it's really animated by two things. One is sex. I realized the other day that there are many love poems to me, and all these sex poems are about other men. Although I really add, they're all about bad sex with other men, so maybe I got off easy. But it's also animated by Walter's pretty intense class anger, which coming from a working class town in Patchogue, Long Island, with a seamstress for a mother and a butcher for a father. He loved living in intellectual Cambridge and really resented it as well. And that really fuels a lot of the poems. Anyway, I think the book is amazing. I'm so glad it's out. Thank you so much, Philip and Tom and Sven, the publisher. It would literally, not an Oscar thing, it really wouldn't have happened without you. And I think I just want to say thank you to everybody, and I hope you enjoyed the poetry when people read it tonight. I'm sure the readers we have, they'll all be wonderful. So thank you.
Before I introduced the first reader, I realized that I didn't show people the cover of the book when I was giving the initial introduction. Here is the book. This is the history of the collected poems of Walta Borawski that all of the readers will be reading from. And I should mention that there are copies in the back. So if anybody likes what they hear tonight, you should buy a copy here at the Bureau and help support their work. So our first reader of poems tonight will be Charlotte Abbott. Charlotte Abbott is a storytelling and community building strategist who works with authors, experts, and cultural organizations to build loyal audiences and keep them engaged. Her clients have included National Public Radio, the Brooklyn Public Library, and NetGalley, a publishing startup she helped become an industry leader. Previously, she was an acquiring editor at HarperCollins Publishers and a journalist at Publishers Weekly. Charlotte Abbott.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Michael. And thanks to all of you. This is really, I've been in this room in so many incarnations and now it's pink. So I love it. I remember being here with Leslie Feinstein when it first opened and the chairs were facing the other way. This is back in, unspeakably long ago. So before it was even a bookstore or there was any kind of, ongoing programming here. So it's exciting that we have an institution, Bureau of General Services. And it's really an honor to read Walter's work and to have the opportunity to go back and really immerse myself in the thoughts and feelings of someone who was living through that time. It really brought so much back, good and bad. So there was lots to choose from and it was hard to choose. I'm reading Legend Has It. When Jack Parr asked Judy Garland how it felt to be a legend, she cleared her throat and said hoarsely, "It's peculiar." A consummate singer, she knew the weight of the word, the designation of intonation. Sometimes a drunken slur, a drugged pause, an awkward silence, 2 beats too long, denote damaged brilliance, the luck of the fall, of the falling. It's peculiar, she said. They think, oh, we can't call her. She's a legend. And I sit by the phone Saturday nights, waiting for the phone to ring. This next one is called Figurant. It's almost as if I expected someone else to make the remainder of my life extraordinary. Take my hand, marvelous creature, lead me to the rest of my life. An actor-lover would have been so apropos to the terminally ill. The roles one could play before oblivion took stage center. But would pain not be pain despite persona? No matter, it is not how the actor cast himself, and the dramatis personae of my dwindle returned to normal. No last-minute stars, all creative talent, mine.
Thank you, Charlotte. Our next reader this evening, who I should note, his novel Homo Novus is sitting right here on the table at the bureau, is Gerard Cabrera. Gerard Cabrera is a Masserican from Springfield, Massachusetts, the birthplace of the first American dictionary, Dr. Seuss, and basketball. His writing has appeared in Gay Community News, Accentos Review, Angel Rust, Apricity, Jonathan, and Quayle. His novel, Homo Novus, was published in October 2022 by Rattling Good Yarns Press and was supported in part by the Breadloaf Writers Conference and a Breadloaf Bakeless Foundation Fellowship, along with the Camargo Foundation in Cassis, France. He lives and works in New York City. This is Gerard Cabrera.
Thank you all very much. It's great to be here tonight. And thank you, Michael, for inviting me. And thank you to the Bureau for hosting this event. I met Walter in 1984. I was a junior in college and I got a work study job, proofreading at Gay Community News Thursday night. And that's where I met all the wonderful people that I met at Gay Community News, Michael, Kevin, and other people like Richard Burns and et cetera. And through that circle is how I came out. And through Michael, I met Walter. Now, Walter, I understand now why my memories of Walter are sort of hazy. It's because he was always taking off, like you said. So I remember the records and the record player blaring, and him sort of being, you know, there, and sort of his presence was there, but he was sort of in and out. So it's actually through Michael and through Walter and the people at Gay Community News that I took an interest in poetry. And so the first poem I'm going to read of Walter's is one that sort of opened the door for me. It's called Role Model. Father says I should try harder to be like Rory Calhoun. I still intend to be Elizabeth Taylor. Though mother has never fully forgiven her, even after the near fatal tracheotomy for stealing Eddie Fisher from Debbie Reynolds. I imagine myself in violet dresses with violet contact lenses and the largest diamonds outside the Tower of London. Jewelry box to that other lesser Liz. I too would toss 39 carats like a stereotypical cheerleader her steadies class ring, loosely on a vulgar chain. Tick tock. Expensive pendulum as I pass by, ogled, heavily insured. They would say I'm too fat. I think that was the ghost of Liz. I'd say, so what's Twiggy's last name? I keep frightfully well-framed renderings of my 7 husbands, hard-ons, nude on the piano. Barbara Cook would giggle when she came round to sing songs they'd never let me record, simply because my voice could not possibly match my face. Even my pets would be exotic. Ocelots, unchained tigers, talking birds with vocabularies unexpectedly salty as my own. For what is fantasy but the stroke of fate, of face, that leaves one person taking orders in a pizza joint, another a queen. The second poem I'm going to read to you is called Propriety. Here we go. George has a motorbike. I won't go on it, not because George never had a car license, and this is a whole new thing, but in my youth, Victor Clayman took me for so many rides, I bought my own crash helmet. And when we pulled into my father's garage next to the Nova, I'd pull Victor down on the sawdust, on the motor oil, suck his big cock, handsome arms wrapped around my shoulders, my fingers sliding into his wide ass. He always came so much more slowly than he drove. Even so, we both kept our helmets on. And to wrap things up, is a very short poem that I think is just brilliant and beautiful, and also is dedicated, as the title says, it's for Emily Dickinson and Charlie Shively, a great pair. I saw 2 men and wanted both, but neither wanted me. And that is the extent of my promiscuity.
We have one more poet in our first Walta section before we break for a Robert Ferro interlude, change up from poetry to fiction. And that poet is Philip F. Clarke. Philip F. Clarke is the author of The Carnival of Affection, Sibling Rivalry Press, 2017. He currently teaches at City College, New York, where he received his MFA in creative writing in 2016. His work has been published in Tiferet Journal, the Marshhawk Press Chapter 1 series, Tampa Review, Vox Populi, and Lambda Literary. He has conducted poetry classes at the Hudson Valley Writers Center, and his work has most recently been published in On Becoming a Poet, Essential Information About the Writing Craft, which is from Marshhawk Press in 2020. Welcome, Philip F. Clarke.
Thank you, brother. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you to everyone involved in this room, in this time, in this day, World AIDS Day. And today is a time of loss, we might think, hope, we always think, and to be in the presence of these poems and these writings is what makes us survive. So thank you all for being here so much. It's hard to compete with Walta. You read him on the page, and then you read him out loud, and you think, am I ever going to dare write a boring poem again? Ever? No, you can't. I'm going to start with the poem that really made me laugh, made me cry in a way. Cheers, cheers for old cha-cha ass. Cheers, cheers for old Patchogue High. You bring the whiskey, I'll bring the rye. When we yell, we'll yell like hell. Acne, puberty, dry heaves. Each preschool morning were not bad enough. At Patchogue High, a circle of charming boys called me Cha-Cha Ass Borawski. Hey, look at Walter. He cha-chas when he walks. He cha-chas when he tries to hit a ball. He probably cha-chas while he shits. Let's watch. I'm in a toilet store, making up God. Oh, Lord God, let me kiss your boot. Do you think you could disguise me? Hey, look, Jane Mansfield's in Borowski's gym suit. Hey, Jane, what's happened to your tits? If Walter had Mansfield tits, I'd screw him. If Walter had Mansfield's tits, we'd all screw him. Ha ha, cha cha cha. Ha ha, cha cha cha, until shots called are one's own shots. They are ugly and must be muffled. I said no to their 10th year reunion. I added a sketch. I threw in a poem. Cha-Cha Askarowski will not be there. He don't mind the name anymore. He's thinking of legally adopting it. But now he merengues when he walks. He dreams up the devil when he shits. On seeing oneself years later in an inexpensive restaurant. You study, you pass, you show them you can do it. Your father talks like my father, so I change my seat at the friendly eatery. I want to watch you. He is wearing, your father, one of those jackets that says his name is Tony and has a map of Japan on the back. I suspect your mother's been keeping it clean and pressed since World War II. She wears a worn gray sweater. I can't see her skirt. Sometimes women of the educated classes dress like your mother to be comfortable. Sometimes men of the educated classes dress like your father for sports watching or fishing trips. But they do not wear these clothes for pre-graduation dinners, nor do they slap each other's tired fabric. Even you, so long-haired and high schooly in your tired, unfashionable clothes, do not look happy. You look out the window when there is a silence at your table, just like other people. Your mother has long, dark, wavy hair. She shakes it and looks out too. I wish I could see her face. Maybe she is my mother, and maybe your father. Bringing the pizza back to the counter to demand more oil is my father, though he never took us out, even for pizza, and he served in Germany. Don't study, don't pass, don't show them. I want to say, it will take years before, or maybe you will never again enjoy pizza with your folks if you do. And this is Aborted Adonis for Bruce Goodchild. Waking in a storm, pre-night dark, thinking I could run. I find my jock, my shoes, push floor, sit up, see the cactus blooming on the sill. How nice. Naked buttocks kiss wood, press hair, press the door frame, it flows, the force reminds. Beginning again to clothe my body, put limbs in shorts and shirt and hooded jacket, can't ride without a helmet, and on down the stairs, searching for keys, safety pin. They'll kill me one day, coming unpinned. I lose my wind, don't find it. Vault the storm, the steps. I climb, do not undress, do not fly.
Instead, we're going to have the Robert Ferro section of the evening now, and Philip is actually going to be coming back shortly in order to read a bit of his novel Second Son. What I wanted to do this evening, though, in addition, for many years in my collection, I've had a signed copy of Ferro's first novel, The Family of Max Desir. And I wanted to donate that tonight to the Bureau, in part to thank you for hosting both of these. Our first reader, though, of Second Son is going to be Tom Cardamone. Tom Cardamone is the editor of Crashing Cathedrals, Edmund White by the Book, and co-editor of Fever Spores, the queer reclamation of William S. Burroughs. He's the author of the Lambda Literary Award-winning speculative novella Green Thumb, as well as the erotic fantasy The Lurid Sea, and other works of fiction, including 2 short story collections. Welcome, Tom Cardamone.
like we're all seeing how tall we are next to I'm going to read from my introduction to the reissue of Second Son from ReQueered Tales. And I think the introduction kind of gives a little bit of a backstory to this gathering as well. Robert Ferro's fourth novel, Second Son, was published in 1988, the year of the author's death from AIDS, and is dedicated to his partner, the writer Michael Grumley, who predeceased him by just 2 months. Robert died at his father's place in New Jersey, not far from the beach house where much of Second Son is set, a sprawling home that overlooks an ocean of undersea cities, familial drama, and the hopes of countless men stolen by a vast, cruel tide. Mark Valerian, the second son in question, part of a large, complicated family, enters an affair exacerbated by AIDS, while conversely elevated through the best that love has to offer, vibrant connection. Our lovers were introduced by Mark's friend, Matthew Black, via letters to Rome, the eternal city, where Mark works and resides, and Billy Mackey is visiting. Matthew is sequestered in the balmy purgatory that is Florida to take care of his invalid mother, a story so reminiscent of the main character's circumstances in Andrew Holleran's 1996 novel, The Beauty of Men, as to more than hint at Matthew Black's real-life inspiration. This is pure speculation on my part. However, both authors were members of the storied yet short-lived gay writers group, the Violet Quill. 10 years after Second Son was published, I moved to New York City at the age of 28 to belatedly come out of the closet. I entered a wondrous and frightening maze of bookstores and nightclubs. As a ravenous reader, an entirely new world of gay books awaited me. As I read, lived, and loved, I also started to write and to meet other gay authors. I would ask these writers for recommendations and often hear the same refrain: if you can find it, it's out of print. Flummoxed that so many of the books I found so fascinating were only available as dusty, used, or remaindered copies, I set about editing the lost library, Gay Fiction Rediscovered, inviting gay writers I knew or had recently read to contribute an essay about a favorite novel or short story collection that had slipped out of print. Each in turn was asked to invite another writer to the project, which is how I met Philip Clark, Michael Bronski, Christopher Bram, Jerry Roscoe, Jerry, and also Stephen Greco. And he introduced me to the stellar literary feat that is Robert Ferro's third novel, The Blue Star, also recently republished. Stephen was friends with Robert and Michael and a frequent guest at the aforementioned beach house. In his essay, he regales readers with the magical treasure hunt he left behind for the couple after a weekend stay. This is doubly fantastic as it replicates the secret otherworldly voyages that exist in both The Blue Star and Secret Son, and their jointly authored nonfiction book, Atlantis, Autobiography of a Search. Years later, Stephen invited me to serve as a judge for the Ferro Grumley Award, a much coveted annual prize he directs that not only honors their namesake, but expands our lyric heritage by celebrating new and noteworthy authors. The return of this indisputable gay classic allows new generations to marvel at Ferro's virtuosity as a writer. And I quote, "In the morning light, they showed each other the spots on their bodies. Except for 2 on his neck, bills were confined to his left arm and leg. All that remained on Mark were small scars from 6 or 7 lesions that had been removed, and others on the bottom of his right foot that he intended to take care of at home." "Why did you have them removed?" Bill asked, touching Mark's foot the way Dr. Thompson did, fearlessly and with tactile interest. "They seem like little factories to me. I shut them down. No one agrees." With sheets around their shoulders and cups of coffee, they went up to the terrace and sat where they had made love the night before, watching the birds dart in and out of a milky blue mist. Farther reaches of the city slowly came into focus. A single bell rang out with a clarity lacking in everything else. 8, 9, 10, 11. You could see in the sound a little man in robes with a hammer. 12, 13, 14. This is it, Bill said. Perfection. 2,000 years later. After reading this passage among the most poignant in AIDS literature, I found it was time to put down the book. 7 o'clock, New York City, April 2020. I moved off my bed and into the kitchen, moving from one of the early great works of literature concerning an epidemic that is far from over to a new ritual during a pandemic that had just begun. I leaned out my open window in downtown Brooklyn and joined the multitudes clapping and hooting and hollering in honor of the first responders as COVID-19 ravaged my city. My formerly pristine hardback copy of Second Son lay open on gray sheets. Open like brave tales told regardless the outcome. Open like the joy of a song sung at dusk in spite of how dark the coming night. Open like the thousands of palms striking one another outside of New York City windows. Open like the pair of hands holding the new copy of Second Son, decades later. How we persist.
Thanks for those words, Tom. We're going to be bringing Philip F. Clark back up to the stage to read a passage from Second Son. Philip.
Second Son is certainly a story, beautiful, joyful, sad, but always a story of spaces, rooms, whether in Italy, in the Cape, in a hospital bed. And I'm going to read a section which to me struck me in this marvelous novel about how spaces interact with the human beings inside them. Now when he entered a room or suddenly turned, he encountered himself and his family, his siblings and nieces and parents, as if he had been mistaken in thinking them gone and himself alone. How could he be alone there again, except for a few moments at a time? It had become, besides, actually the sort of house that attracted people to it in a daily ration of deliveries. The maid, plumber, carpenter, furnace man, the painter who never finished and seemed to work on his own, the alarm man, the gardeners. Mark would hear them on the gravel, or the too loud bell would ring, and he would see again the futility of thinking it was a house to be alone in. The others asked what he did with himself, knowing to themselves that he did simply everything and was endlessly busy. It was large, with every nook of it developed into something. The hatch at the top of the tower was ajar. When it was open, the covers of magazines on the table by the fireplace, 3 floors below, lifted and settled on the coil of updraft, swirling through the room. Or some quadrant of the lawn was being watered, or a storm the day before had misted the north-facing windows to a blur that must be squeegeed, or a drain at the back was loose, or Morse had begun in the outdoor shower, as it did every year, a furry lime green that called to mind the Baroque grottos, overachieved Italian villas. He was half inclined, scrubbing it away, to let it this year take hold. With his mother gone, the house, far from ever being empty or complete or perfectly in order, was, beyond being a house, a place and monument. This is what the others did not see, except in the passion with which he explained the undertaking of yet some new repair or project. For it was big enough never to be finished, and everything that was done to it, had been done to it, seemed to call up in him a progression of further things, as if it now itself kept a list for itself, a list far more ambitious than his own. When he tried to explain this to Vita, she characteristically voiced her opinion that he'd like to think this was true. Yet of necessity, he would have to say it did not come from the house. These are your standards and ideals, she said. Within the process, you decide. She was no doubt right, her field. But the impulse she described in him was met by something in the house as palpable as its present shape, the shape it would have in the future. When Mark looked at it in a particular way, he saw it suddenly as it eventually would look. He said to Vita, "It's not imagination. I imagine different features and improvements all the time. They don't occur. But sometimes I see something already done, all its details at once. And after that, it's not a matter of imagination, but of recollection of the actual thing." Vita shook her head, willing though temporarily unable to follow. "You mean, of course, the imposition of your will," she suggested. But he had not meant that with the warp of experience folding back on itself, as it did time. It was all on a great tape, racial memory, the collective unconscious her colleagues had been talking about for so long, history itself. The future, the larger flavorsome bits. The house had a soul, it had a history, but not a destiny, she interrupted. It could be sold tomorrow, and then who would interpret these visions? Who would have them? This was precisely the point, he pointed out. No one would. That was his department. Vita did not doubt the potency of the scheme as it inspired him, as it affected him. All 4 or 5 weeks each summer, she basked in this perfection like Princess Grace in the Monaco of her dreams. The rest of the year, with her children and their commitments, with her job and career, it was as if with the others, a question of the odd weekend. They might have held on to the place because the original investment was so eternally dwarfed by modern value. This was the Monaco of everyone's dreams, or now because of Mark. But without him keeping track, none of it would have worked. Mrs. Valerian had managed it alone for 30 years. Now he did in his own way. They all saw his reasons overlapped with their own in letting him. Odd that 4 such people should turn up in the same family, or odd that he should be among them. For it was Mark who made the collection strange, who set the curve with his inverted sexuality, sensitivities and thin skin, his standards and thoughts from some other different place. While they seemed or were strange only in these comparisons with him, which threw them to the opposite ends of all this spectra. George Jr. practical and cunning, Vita evolved and cool, Tessa, the winning, excitable wife and mother, still young, steeped in the details of her children's lives, also different from Mark, and now abundantly clear, after years when it had seemed otherwise. The gallants struggled to convince themselves in the world that he was merely another sort of Valerian, rather like Mrs. Valerian, whose instincts in all of this had been unwavering. This struggle in the end had been incorporated into the great filial wars, pitched battles between Mark and his father that had dragged on for a decade, and in which the heaviest losses had seemed, as usual, to be innocent civilians, the family itself.
Thank you, Phil. That's a beautiful reading. Our next reader from Walta Borawski's poetry is Roz Parr. Roz Parr retired recently after almost 40 years in the book industry. She worked as a bookseller at Compendium in London, and Woman Books, New Morning Books, and A Different Light here in New York City. After stints at Oxford University Press and Viking Penguin, she spent 22 years at the Knopf division of Penguin Random House. Besides reading, she enjoys gardening, walking, and keeping up with friends. This is Roz Clark.
Hi, everybody. You know, reading Walter's poems makes me wish that I had a memory, so that I could recite, because really these poems sort of call out to be recited, not read. The first poem I'm going to read is called The Autobiographies of Utensils, and it's from Sexually Dangerous Poet, which was originally published in 1984. I chose it for its perhaps unusual mix of humor, although there's humor in so many of Walter's poems, but it's a little less acid in this one, sexiness and domesticity. When it comes to loving, I am a colander. You can pour your water all over me. You'll drain my noodles, but your love will disappear. And the butter of your love, another story, will drip through my aluminum or ceramic sides. Get lost in the sink. You don't want it. When it comes to loving, you are an omelette pan, seasoned and trustworthy. You warm evenly. Don't get stuck. Simple Gifts is from the J Poets, which is a sequence written about Walter's obsession with an acting student in Boston, which Philip had to tell me, but I chose it for its tenderness. Many years ago at the club baths in Manhattan, I met a dark youth after hours of lovemaking. He too was sated before he met me, and we asked an attendant for a blanket. It was coarse and grey, and this young man and I lay on a dormitory bleacher with a mirror on the bottom of the upper tier, 4 feet above our heads. As we drifted off, I looked at our reflection, and I knew this is all that I need. On Thursday night, you returned the phone message I had left on your machine, and I glowed for hours.
Thank you, Roz. Our next reader tonight is Erik Rasmussen. Erik Rasmussen is an actor, director, and writer, and was a founding member with Tina Ruan and the late Robbie McCauley, the performance group, All Three. Erik Rasmussen.
This poem is called Surprising Kisses, and it's dedicated to Malcolm. You were my first S&M man. You showed me the ropes, though we had to imagine them in the dorm at the St. Mark's Baths. Don't move one wrist from the other, you ordered. Now, lick me all over. And like a tired or drunken ballet dancer, my tongue twirled passion without form, taking your pleasure moans for applause and flowers. Now and then I plie at your closed mouth, lick your flipped beard and tight lips. Now and then, on cues very much your own, you'd open your mouth and give mine surprising kisses. How odd, how more desirable these than those given freely in uncategorized love, as if kisses are just commodities, obeying the law of supply and demand. Later, you worried that my hair, wet all the while from whirlpool and sauna, steam bath, and love sweat, would catch me cold. You offered me taxi fare home. surprising concern, surprising kisses, but like men of less choreographed fantasy, you said goodbye and good knowing you, and I danced uptown unbound. This poem is the penultimate in the series of the J poems, which chronicle the infatuation with the acting student who was a younger man. And it's called Reality Check. Don't memorize what he wore during chance encounters. You'll always conjure his image in flesh tones. The brown eyes that seemed happy to see you, the summer glow on skin stretched over those muscles, his clothes so tight, so often black or white, sometimes blue, the blue you favor and favors you. How frequently you've worn the same combinations as if you dressed together. Other than that, you were rarely on the same, as some call it, wavelength. You wanted, he didn't. Now he's moving to New York. He giggles, he'll rent in Spanish Harlem. You don't know when you'll have energy for Amtrak. You know you wouldn't meet your train. I dreamed. I dreamed everyone came back. Some chose to return healthy. One had to exercise memory to remind of name. Some came back with marks of illness stamped by disease's design. Everyone was applauded, appreciated, re-acclimated. It was, after all, a miracle. It was, after all, a dream.
The next reader is Emmanuel Xavier. Emmanuel Xavier, a Latinx poet and LGBTQ activist, was born in Brooklyn, New York. Xavier received a New York City Council citation for his many cultural contributions to city arts, and has also been recipient of an International Latino Book Award, Lambda Literary Award nominations, and American Library Association Over the Rainbow book selections for his collections, which include Peer Queen, Americano, If Jesus Were Gay, Nefarious, Radiance, and Selected Poems of Emmanuel Xavier. This is Emmanuel Xavier.
Thank you. Listening to all these great poems and stories reminds us of all the great talent that we lost throughout the years. So it's important that, thank you so much for honoring them today on World AIDS Day. I'm sharing two poems. This first one is called St. Teresa of Hemingway Street. St. Teresa of Hemingway goes down to the co-op, buys vegetables and checks out men. St. Teresa's my sister. We hunt witch together, prefer diamonds to souls. See the diamond in my ear, says St. Teresa. I say, see the man bone in mine. We go walking. St. Teresa passes playgrounds, has a boy in one of them. He thinks he's a superhero. He's called Tyrannosaurus Rex. St. Teresa worries he's male identified. Power, largeness, eats his almost a vegetarian ma and me. How did this happen, asks St. Teresa. With you for his aunt and his father gay too? Time to picnic, shouts St. Teresa, lays a blanket near the Charles, brings white wine and fried chicken wings. No vegetarian, St. Teresa today. We all put flesh in our mouths in times of plenty. St. Teresa had a steady lover, lost him to a law school. Sometimes the phone rings, he's there, she's there too. but in the night, says St. Teresa. To get out of this bummer, St. Teresa plays Simon and Garfunkel, remembers the 60s, men had longer hair, crooned Beatle tune titles in her ear, her bosom buttoned over with "End of War." St. Teresa reads Hemingway, says there were and are men worse than that. He had 30 cats. St. Teresa reads Night Hours Away with Tyrannosaurus Rex in bed. She can. She plays jazz records low, puts out her light, and cats crawl up a lap rug, fur between fingers for St. Teresa. It may just be cats, she says, but it's not superheroes, and it's not going to law school. St. Teresa has a headache, says her glasses are too strong, longs to see without them, takes them off, depends on me to cruise the runners, the ones in white shorts, when sweat makes men see through. St. Teresa says there's too much distance between friends, between smiles on the street, between men who love you all night and stay in the morning for coffee and cranberry buns. St. Teresa looks at the river, says, what would we do if it would not flow? The second poem is a short poem called Relationships Have Boundaries. Relationships have boundaries, like discontented countries, filled with questions and fear centuries patrol, never pleased with travelers' answers. Visas are granted by mutual need and unlimited compromise. I am now quite invisible. We exist, if at all, in subsequent treaties. In peace, perhaps we are boring. In war, silenced by guns. Thank you.
I first read poetry by Walta Borawski when I was a high school student. I found poems by him in the anthology Son of the Male Muse, edited by Ian Young. And he and other poets like Jim Eberhard and Tim Blugos and Donald Britton were in these anthologies and volumes in the library of a gay youth group in DC where I grew up called SMILE, Sexual Minority Youth Assistance League. I just thought I was a gay teen, but apparently I was a sexual minority youth, which sounds a lot more important. But they really did have a wonderful library. And because I think I first read Walta in The Son of the Male Muse, probably Invisible History, the title poem of the collection, is the first of his poems that I ever read. And when it came time to edit the anthology, the collection of the work, I said, that's the title poem. So this is Invisible History. My shrink told me it was unnatural to be obsessed with the Nazi extermination of homosexuals. Look at me. I'm normal, he said. I sleep nights and I'm healthy enough to listen to your stories and others worse than yours. And I still have sex and I'm Jewish. So what's with these nightmare pogroms? Find yourself a hot guy to go to bed with or do it on the floor of his car. Stop it with these death camps. I knew he was right, that his people had lost millions more than my people. But piles of emaciated, tortured, worked to death, gassed to death, clubbed to death bodies resemble each other, and they resemble us. Look at that man on top of the others. Look at his beard. He could be me. When I was 6, my father first told me about liberation of the camps by the Allies. He was US Army, and they entered at last, and those bodies, he said, those bodies. By the time I was 15, my eye doctor showed mercy to me, put me on sleeping pills, circles around my eyes. I told him I couldn't sleep, and when I did fall, I found myself behind wire, barbed or electric, my head shaved, an empty expression leering back at me, at everyone in this odd century of horror, so systematic, so organized. I'll give you these pills, he said, but don't abuse them. And cut out the fantasies. You're not even Jewish. I hate to contradict you, Michael, but I think you've already been contradicted. Not all the sex poems were about bad sex. This is from Sexually Dangerous Poet. It's called Things Are Still Sudden and Wonderful. Once it was 1962 and somebody kissed you. You freaked. He held you down, pressed his 15-year-old football team thighs hard against your thin kid with glasses legs. It was like a Lana Turner movie. You decided to be gay. In 1982, your lover puts you down on all fours and masturbates you. Sometimes you come with a leash on in more than one room. You've not forgotten the football player's name. Moving ahead to Walta's second book, Lingering in a Silk Shirt, a number of those poems began to deal with the effects of AIDS on Walta and on others in the gay community. This is one of those poems. It's called Virus Cutting. Virus cutting me short. Yet here I am with some show tune in my head. So insistent, so splendid a lyric, I can't get back to sleep. This is a battle cry. I put a Bach tape on the bedside boombox, tried to calm this hero, this warrior queen, this Long Island movie usher. My armor's a chartreuse t-shirt, my agenda, to live. They tell us repeatedly that the deadly virus is invariably fatal. Yet every morning, drugged and insomniac, queers filled with toxicity and enchantment, fire and fungus, hear their voices, then broadcast our own news. And I'll close here with one final short poem, also from Lingering in a Silk Shirt. The poem is called For John Wieners. Walta's book was published, his book Sexually Dangerous Poet was published by Good Gay Poets. The very first book that was published by Good Gay Poets was by John Wieners, and the very last book in the series was Sexually Dangerous Poet. So as Michael mentioned, Walta was not operating in a vacuum, he was operating in this great community of other poets. But to end us here, this is For John Wieners. In Provincetown, 1991, the drag queen starring in 2 Charles Busch plays has very muscular arms. Since the one Busch play incorporates a line from the boys in the band, I shall quote another. I hurt my heels doing chin-ups. You shouldn't do chin-ups in heels. Drag queens, flowers, and women who sing are still the fulcrum of my teeter-totter. And I think you'll find if you read the book, drag queens and women who sing and flowers appearing many, many times in there. So hopefully you like those things because then you'll definitely like Walta's poetry and you'll like invisible history. I'd like to really thank all of the readers who came out tonight, not only for Walta's work in Invisible History, but also for the re-release of Robert Ferro's Second Son from ReQueered Tales. I wanted to mention that we do have a Facebook page going for Invisible History, so if you'd like to learn more about Walta, there's going to be photographs from the archives, some never before seen things, links to more information about Walta, some poems, and other information about the book as it makes its way out into the world. I've also been told to let you know that there's an after party. There's going to be an after party going on, optional of course, at Julius's Bar, which is at 159 West 10th Street. So if anybody wants to come and join some of us at Julius's and keep the party going, that will be an option. Again, thank you very much to the Bureau of General Services, Queer Division, for hosting this event tonight. And as a reminder, copies of both Invisible History and Robert Ferro's Second Son are available for purchase right here, right now. So please do that. Again, thanks very much. And that brings us to the conclusion our program here for World AIDS Day 2022.
Thank you all for coming this evening. We love you. That's all we can say. After 10 years, we made 10 years in November on the 16th. Hang around, visit. We'll pick up the chairs. If you decide you want to pick up that chair, right over here, right against that bookshelf, not against the art. Thank you. Have a good night.